Hello and welcome to Classic Comics Cavalcade. I'm Jason Sachs. You'll meet my friend Carl Smith in just a moment as we will be resuming our conversation about the rise of Valiant Comics in the early 1990s. This is part two of a story that'll probably take 5 or 6 parts, but we wanted to kind of break it up so it didn't feel so overwhelming. What you missed, if you haven't seen the first part, which is linked down below in the description, is the story of the beginnings of Valiant, how Jim Shooter attempted to buy Marvel, about how he did not buy Marvel, about how he gathered some friends, created a new comic book company, made a deal with Gold Key Comics to buy a couple of characters, as well as to create a line of Nintendo comics, which are pretty terrible and a pretty complete flop for Valiant. So as we left the last episode, Valiant was at its lowest ebb, but soon to rise up like a phoenix out of its own ashes to find unity in quality. So without further ado, here's me and Carl. So it's interesting because here's Shooter, this comics is the classic comics figure. Was he due to pivot and try to save the company? He's like, let's put out these gold key comics. So March 1991, Magnus Robot Fighter #1 comes out. And it's a they barely have the Valiant logo on the covers at the bottom, but not that anyone would care. Sold for $1.75 at a time when most comics were selling for $1. Sold about 70,000 copies, which placed it like in the 90th in the sales charts. And then it went down for a few months, but the comic was actually good.
Not it was good, and it also continued basically from the same continuity from the 60s. Well, I mean, they published that sort of longer, but uh so like newer readers may not even have known that it was not a new character. But when you read it and you're familiar with the old one, I mean, it does kind of have that reboot to it, but for the most part it honors that old continuity. One thing that I want to point out too, while we're on the number one of Magnus, is it also looked a lot different than other comic books of its time as far as colors and things. Like the artwork and the colors, the paper that it was on, none of it felt like Marvel of 1991.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't big, it wasn't bright. It had a different vibe, but right out of the gate.
Yeah, and that was always the thing that separated Valiant books really throughout the VH1, as people call it, was that there was focus on stories and like traditional artwork, and also this kind of very strong month-to-month continuity. This is where Shooter's really showing his roots. He learned under the classic storytelling approach. At the same time, folks like Liefeld and Lee were doing the books that moved into the Valiant level, Valiant era, which were very slick and overly detailed, and the stories were very slight. It's amazing how much happens in the random issue of Magnus Robot Fighter, and how not flashy the work is, but how much detail is in that work.
Yeah, and how that retro chic vibe still is there. The robots still look like Jetsons level robots. They don't look like Terminator, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really just kind of went with the story as it was. And if you compare that to maybe like when Dark Horse later tried to reboot Magnus, they kind of fell into that trap where they tried to really ultra modernize it, and it doesn't feel the same, it doesn't look the same, it doesn't read the same. But it was really kind of commendable, although it might have been the path of least resistance for them to just kind of carry on with things the way they were. But it's commendable to me that they didn't just do a all out reboot on it.
So Shooter wrote the first dozen or so issues and had people like Art Nichols, who's not a prominent artist, and his pal Bob Layton inking it with Catherine Bollinger. Um, I rereading Steel Nation, the first storyline. Well, actually, rereading all the pre-Unity stories, which is a topic I'll get to in a minute. I was amazed how amazing the action was in these comics. There is a lot that goes on here. Um, I'll say like he also May they launched Magnus. September 91 they launched Solar Man of the Atom and they were for several months they were the paired books on the line. Magnus ended up selling about 80,000 80,000 for its first issue. Solar about 60, and then they ended up both selling between about 50 and 60,000 per issue at that point. So they did well, but not great for that time
So
period.
those were modest sales for 1991. Can you imagine launching now and getting 80,000 copies sold?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you'd be the top of the heap. I mean, other than Batman Absolute, maybe, but
Remember, summer of 91 is when Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man #1 comes out and sold 4.1 million copies or
good
something.
Lord. How many of those got pulped?
Other, as long as you're not looking for the platinum, I think you can buy 10 copies for $1 on
Oh my
eBay.
gosh.
But yeah, sorry, I was back to the point. Like, these are great comics. Like, they're really showing like Shooter's ability as a writer to tell big stories that cross time and space, and they're true epics. Like I was imagining these as movies, and we rarely see movies even at this level these days. I mean, the Steel Nation saga and Magnus, like there's an issue where he kills 1 million robots.
Yeah. And it has like political intrigue and like some interpersonal stuff that didn't necessarily have to be in there, but it made it a better story for it being there. I mean, it's just, and then that whole relationship with him being raised by robots, like it's
Yeah,
something that shouldn't make a lot of sense, but like it actually adds to the pathos of the story.
and his relationship with his Legia character, who also carried on from Magnus, and then talking about the continuity, like he talks about how she was basically this debutante pretty girl who was not serious. And then as the storyline goes on, she changes radically, becomes a tough woman of the 90s, and is fighting for the revolution against the robot rule. Like this whole thing just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's a space opera to start with. I mean, and it kind of operates in a bottle, which at that time I think helped it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you didn't have to explain how it tied into Turok and everything else, like it just was happening kind of as a story progressing forward.
Yeah. I was even more impressed by Solar because Solar, as you know, is a man who becomes a god in a nuclear explosion. He's basically
Right.
Dr. Manhattan.
Well, I mean, have you? I'm sure you have. You've gone back and read the Gold Key Solar.
A little bit, yeah.
So in maybe the first two, maybe three issues, it's compelling as an adult to read, and then after that, it's kind of wackadoo. But it amazes me how much Solar, the Man of the Atom, is basically just the Incredible Hulk.
Ah,
And I know that there's always like been some controversy about the timing of Hulk and that releasing because the nuclear explosion. Solar turned green when he activated his powers for a long time. He didn't have his costume for a while at the beginning,
right.
uh, and so I think. Whereas Magnus, I think, benefited from them carrying over the bulk of the continuity and just going the Valiant way with it. I think Solar did better by kind of stepping back and coming up with like something from fresh cloth with it.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And he doesn't appear in the costume in the first issue. Puts it on the second, and that's a weird ass costume.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
kind of an alienating costume.
yeah. It's jarring for 1990s, especially because I mean, not that Magnus wasn't with his short skirt and all that, but
But he looked like a hero. Magnus just
yes,
looked like a weirdo. And then what Shooter does with him, it's a really well written book to me because, you know, you have this guy who's got godlike powers, but he's fighting these evils that he just can't. They're playing on his the personal issues, and they're playing on the issues with him trying to control what's happening, and they're causing him to have to fly through the cosmos, and they're really playing against what would make Solar's powers work for him. In fact, it feels like they almost work against him.
it's a very cosmic story. even though it's not
Even
set.
mention it in the very first issue. Not only does he not wear a costume, but when we first meet him, he's naked, flying
Yeah.
through space.
So let's get the elephant out of the room, because you're a fellow fan of this series as well. How much do you read into Solar, your oh, I went blank on his name, Starbrand?
So Starbrand is Jim Shooter.
Do you
Starbrand
think
is
that's just an author self-injecting into? Do
uh
you feel like that same vibe with Nexus?
with Solar. Yeah, I think so. I
I
think
just
there's a lot of
that
him kind of.
tremendous power and that kind of weepy, like no one really understands who I am as a human being. Even myself, I don't understand myself. Like how do I relate to myself now that I have this power?
Well, gosh, I mean, I only met him once. I didn't spend a lot of time with Shooter, but yeah, he has a real strong sense of like. It seems like he has a real strong sense of like, no one gets me for who I am. I'm a genius. I know I can control worlds, but I'm deeply misunderstood, and forces even more powerful than me keep pushing me around. So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, and that's when it kind of felt like home to me a little bit, because like I said, I had been so all in on New Universe. I'm like, these comics are happening kind of in a real time. They're adults. The world that's around these people, even Magnus, is as insane as it is to say this, feels like it's in a real world.
Yeah,
Like there's rules, there's people just living their lives, there's stratifications of economic classes and political pressures. I mean, and it isn't always to serve the story. It just is happening. It just feels like a real world. And Solar even feels more real because it is happening in a very, 1991 America, setting. Uh, and other comics didn't feel that way. I didn't feel like Spider-Man's New York felt real to me. But Solar definitely did.
yeah. In a way that like you wouldn't expect a character like Solar to feel real because the he's so powerful, right? There's at least twice in the pre-Unity issues he screams out, "I'm a god."
But even before he gains his powers, he's sort of almost megalomaniacal about his intelligence and you know uh, that whole like I'm the only one that truly understands what this machine can do. Like
Yeah. In Solar, we get the introduction of Erica Pierce, who ends up being a really crucial character who we don't expect to. And that's the other thing in these comics is I feel like there's a lot of stealth continuity being built up in them. Solar and Magnus meet. Magnus meets a character named Rai, who was in the future Japan. I think we'll talk about Rai some next time. Um, Solar also meets the Harbingers, and like there's this very kind of subtle, interesting continuity that happens all throughout the these comics, where there really is a sense of Shooter and team building this larger world that everyone is going to be part of. And I really see how that'd be so exciting reading these early issues because it happens relatively subtly, but the characters are cover featured.
well the rollout of titles instead of like we're launching this new line of comics with a shared continuity and there's 8 titles and there's something for everybody. It didn't happen that way. We like did Magnus and then we added Solar and then we added was Harbinger in the next one
Harbinger
or
was the
Archer and
next one,
Armstrong.
which no, Archer and Armstrong started a little bit later.
Yeah.
Uh Harbinger was the next one, written by Shooter, drawn by his pal Lapham. Similar to the X-Men, similar to DP7 from the New Universe titles, but takes place in real time. And it's about teenagers, and death is permanent. And these characters have what feel like real human emotions too.
Real
One thing
human
Shooter never was shy
attitudes.
attitudes. Yeah. Well, what like these characters eat, these characters have sex, these characters don't like each other. These characters tease poor Faith, calling her Zeppelin instead of Zephyr, which is what she wants to be called because she's fat. Uh and like it just reading it now, it just feels like so much like my actual high school, although we
Yeah,
didn't have
like
superpowers.
just a little toxic.
Yeah, it is toxic, right? It's not a place I wanted to spend time in.
it
Uh,
feels it feels interesting to read the old Harbingers because there's a sympathy in the revival years, which we'll talk about later, but there's a sympathy for them because they're being torn apart by all these other principalities that are trying to control them.
yeah.
And then they cross them over with Bloodshot and all that. And so the default feeling is like, leave these kids alone. But in Harbinger and VH1, it's like, man, they're kind of buttholes. Like,
Uh-huh.
like they just got like burdened with these powers and aren't able to emotionally deal with it.
Yeah. And like one of them, spoiler, one of them dies early on. And like the issue where they deal with his death felt
Oh, that was rough.
exceptional.
Yeah. Even the cover is brutal, if I remember right. I don't have I
Yeah, it
didn't,
is.
yeah, yeah, it's just like,
It is. It's going to be it's on the screen now, viewers. Yeah, it's just a brutal ass comic. And then speaking of brutal, then around the same time, the next book was X-O Manowar,
yes.
which has always been my favorite of all the Valiant books. I
You're,
love how he's Conan in a
yeah,
can.
I was gonna say you always mention he's Conan in a can, which is like the most like accurate slash reductionist view of the comic, but it is exactly what it is. Like he's a barbarian given Iron Man armor. Like,
And it's just as good as you want it to be.
oh, it's everything you want it to be. And I fell in love with that book so hard. Uh yeah, that was the book I needed at that point in my life to stay in comic books.
Oh, nice. Wow.
Yeah, and at that time I had given up on heroes. I mean, uh, you know, Superman was dying, Batman was having his back broken, Aquaman got his hand cut off and grew a big beard, and all this stuff was happening, and I just kind of checked out. I was reading like Stray Toasters and like Ralph Snart. Those were my two books, and then The Max
Good
by Sam
books.
Keith when that came out. But X-O Manowar, being able to pick up those issues and to kind of read this, everybody else was coming out with Comics Greatest World and all these new heroes, new continuity. But X-O Manowar felt like this is a comic I could have been reading for like 20 years. They could have been
Yeah.
publishing. And I just fell in love with it. It was just the perfect superhero comic book for me at that age.
It's a perfect example of what I talked to Dinesh, who was the guy who took over VH2 and was who took over CEO of Valiant when the revival happened. He was a big fan of theirs for many years, and he talks about how they were one of the only IPs that premiered during the '90s that still survived. And I think it's characters like X-O. It's always my favorite, both in the revival and the originals.
Yeah, it's
Something really cool about the character and the way the armor works.
it's I'm not saying it's easy to write, but I think when you get handed X-O Manowar, you have fantastic brushes to work with, like
Yeah.
you don't have to work too hard to get a workable story, although they always swing big with him, like especially, I don't know, like uh, him coming back and then the aliens hiding within like this evil conglomerate corporation. And so not only is he like a man out of time and he has this like mysterious alien armor and all that jazz, then he's also trying to like unmask this like corporate powerhouse for like the
Hmm.
evil that it really is. Like there is a lot going on in there. That was a really big swing for something that could have just been a fight every week.
And he takes over different areas of the world. He's got this Visigoth honor to him. He had a family. He
And kind
misses
of
his
the
family and his people. I love the issues where he has the whole group of settlers with him, and they're building a new community in Romania or somewhere. It's like, yeah,
yeah,
he's like,
his
he's
sense
not
of
even like
borders are
scheming. He
just
just
like,
wants people around him who are
yeah,
going to care for him.
yeah, he's one of my favorite characters in comics. And even now, I mean, not to cast too big of a pall on what Valiant has become today, even with the quality drop that's happened with current management of those characters, X-O still manages to be pretty readable.
Yeah.
It's rough compared to the older stuff, but I can still get lost in it. And I think it's just because that character was just like a masterstroke, whether by purpose or by accident, of everything that a hero, a complex superhero needs to be compelling.
Oh, I love the way he said that too. Yeah, I think that's totally right. Good creation by Bob Layton and great way of putting the flesh on the bones by Layton and Shooter and the other writers.
How
There are
fun would
two
he
more.
be to draw, though? I mean,
It's so
like
much detail to that suit too.
you get a little leeway because it's alien, right? So it's kind of like drawing Venom. Like you can kind of be a little wonky because he doesn't have a definite form. Not like
Yeah.
Iron Man that you have to picture someone putting that molded helmet on and being able to move within it. Uh,
Well, I always
I,
like how the suit is also a sentient creature of its own
yes,
too.
yes, and yeah, it's reminds me of like a very 2000 AD almost, with like Rogue Trooper, where the weapon is also a character, and it doesn't
Yeah.
always want the same thing that the hero wants, and so there's all that internal turmoil that only he's privy to because he's the only one communicating with that armor.
Um, I just had something I was going to. Oh, I also love how the continuity again is really elegant here because he gets the suit from a group of aliens who are like spiders who are about to attack Earth, and then we have a crossover with Solar Man of the Atom, who fights the aliens in the whole long run in his book as well. So there's a real kind of meshing of it. And there's a couple issues where someone puts on a different XO armor, not XO Manowar armor, and they specifically allude to it's not as strong as the Manowar armor. I'm like, yeah, this continuity is really tight and kind of intricate.
So, for the benefit of people who maybe have never really dipped into Valiant, it operates basically on two concurrent timelines. There's modern day and 4000 AD. And so Magnus, right out of the box, is year 4000. And then Solar is modern day.
Right.
So it's always been interesting to me that they were able to even maintain that continuity because they had to have echoes of what happened in the past happen in the future, but not in a way that negated, and they had to go back and retcon everything that happened in Magnus back to issue one. It was very tightly plotted, to be honest, or at least they left enough room for themselves to work. It's very commendable.
And that leads to we have two more titles to cover, and then we're gonna call it done for this time. That leads to Rye, which is like the darkest, weirdest series Valiant ever put out. Imagine the Japan in 4000 AD, where billions of people live in Japan, and somehow they all live inside this bizarre mechanical mecha creature, and Rye is their protector who's like passed on from generation to generation, whether the protector wants him to or not. It's also high concept. I don't even want to like go into all the freaking details of it, but
He's
it's just
basically
like,
the white blood cell for this
yeah,
organism. Yeah, it's insane how that they. It's very cyberpunk. Uh,
very cyberpunk. The last issue of the original Rye run is like one of the darkest comics I've ever read.
I thought that series was over with that issue.
Yeah, it seemed like it was going to be. I'm not sure how good it is, but I love the series.
Yeah.
And then it's a bit of foreshadowing for a future series, Bloodshot.
Yes. Yeah. That's always confusing if you don't read the comics, especially, and even if you kind of henpeck at some of the Valiant titles, it isn't really clear. Like, boy, they sure like their big red circles on their chests.
Yeah. And he's got him on his hands and feet like they're stigmata too. Uh, that was presented as a flip book for uh, Magnus because Valiant liked their gimmicks. They weren't doing holofoil covers at that time, but they were doing their gimmicks.
So, so the Harbinger episode or issue that we mentioned, did it not come in either a polybag or like a false cover wraparound, like a nondescript almost like a sketch cover on the outside that said like events that happen in this book will be spoiled, or I feel like there was something with that issue. You could buy it both different ways.
I'll have to do that research. Okay,
I
I can't
I don't really
remember that.
remember, but I always kind of thought that was their first big gimmick, other than the pull out sections from Solar, and then of course the flip books. Do you think the flip books were more of a necessity? They wanted to like get these stories out there without launching a new, like it
Yeah,
was like a backdoor pilot almost. But
yeah. And I think they just felt like there would be a little thing that would help them sell the comics. In most cases, like it was an addition. Like they also did the world's biggest comics panel ever in Solar Man of the Atom, and they have these mini stories inside with art by Barry Windsor Smith, which looks phenomenal.
Alpha and Omega, it's like my favorite Valiant thing they've ever done. Is just
Yeah,
that story.
looks just gorgeous. So yeah, I think they at that time they did the gimmick covers with integrity.
Yeah.
Uh
Do you?
Later on it's a different topic, but
I can't recall, but their flip books with Rye and Magnus, were they like basically reduced stories down to the size of a backup story? Then they weren't like 24
no, they
pages
were
and 24 pages, were they?
additional pages.
They were.
Yeah. It was like a 22 page Magnus story with an 8 page additional
Oh,
story
okay, okay.
published as a flip
Yeah,
book.
I couldn't remember
Or eight
like how
page,
that worked
sorry,
out.
they were 8 page solar stories with an additional or wrapped around a 22 page
Whichever was
larger story.
necessity to have the more space,
Yeah.
huh?
Yeah. I think it was a little bit of like, come on, buy our books, we'll give you better value for the money. The
So do you
last
buy two copies to put in your long boxes then, so that you don't have a break in continuity when you're going through Rye?
Well,
Because
now
I
I
mean,
can because they would cost me a whole 50 cents to buy two
right? I
copies.
mean, what a nightmare that is for someone that's anal retentive, like most of us are with our comic storage. Like where
Well,
do you put it?
how about with the send away coupons to get a copy of the zero
Oh yeah,
issue?
you got to mangle your freaking comics just to get the hot one, the one that's going to be worth money that you can retire on, right?
Yeah. Someone actually calls out Shooter an issue for making a deal with Mile High Comics to sell a bunch of copies of
To
Magnus
sell
Living
additional
Hero.
copies just to claim the coupons.
Yeah. Let's quickly talk about the last of the Valiant titles, which I think is the least of the Valiant titles, which is Shadow Man.
Yeah.
It's a
You
book
know
that
that
doesn't really fit anything else. It's
that book
okay.
persists and it never strikes a chord with me. And every iteration of Valiant, every generation of it, Shadow Man is like the weakest book.
Always is, right?
And it has his fans, and I think partly because it's that gothic and that New Orleans kind of vibe, but it always seemed lame and hokey and a stretch. It just I you know and there again, if you go back to New Universe, Night Nightwing, what was his
Night
name?
Mask.
Night Mask. He was the same way. Like he his series didn't last long. He was kind of hokey. Like I just maybe it's just a type of character I don't like, but man, every time Valiant, brings out Shadow Man, it just is a lesser than book. It probably is perfectly fine. Just in comparison to everything else that's going on in that line, it just is. It's always going to be the stepchild.
So we're up against the conclusion of this episode, which is what happens out of the first year or year and a half titles is a crossover event called Unity. It changes everything. There's a pre-Unity and a post-Unity Valiant Comics. Uh, before we'll get to that in the next episode, like I said, but how would you sum up the pre-Unity era, Carl? I think you
Pre
talked about it a
Unity,
bit just now.
yeah, pre Unity to me is I feel like you either were just buying comics because you were curious at that time, or you were somehow in the know. Because once Unity happens, Valiant is like a full on phenomenon. And so there was no pressure, I don't think. Well, I mean, there was always going to be pressure for sales and everything, but they organically grew pre-Unity and got it
Yeah.
right and got it right. I think after the crossover, they fall to the same problems that any comic line does when they do a shared universe and too many titles and so on. They have to look like Marvel, right? Because Marvel's putting out books constantly. So we have to have new heroes and all these things. But
Foil
yeah, to me,
covers, all kinds of
yeah,
clever gimmicks, slicker art.
pre-Unity to me was like hearing a band before they sign with a major label. You know, it's like the people who were there, maybe there was some wonky stuff, but that's the stuff you're always going to love the most, you know?
The titles still stand up. They actually read better to me now than almost anything from that era.
I hope that Robert Kirkman and his crew over at Skybound, now that they have rights to those gold key characters, I hope somehow they got the rights to the Valiant files, like they did with the GI Joe and the Transformers, because I would
Totally.
love to see him kickstart an omnibus with this material because it isn't available. And I mean, other than digging through long boxes at comic shops, but
Be lost forever if it doesn't get revived in some way.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to have it in a book that I could just sit and read it, start to finish.
I've daydreamed about making my own book, but that would just be for me and our little cadre of friends.
Right.
Uh, thank you, Carl. You exceeded my expectations.
Oh, I do nothing but ramble.
That was perfect.